All right, American history peeps, we're going to talk about the causes of the Great Depression and how President Hoover handled this situation. So the election of 1928, you had the Democrats nominated Alfred Smith. I believe he was governor of New York at the time. He was a Catholic, had a very thick New Yorker accent, and he was wet, meaning he wanted to end prohibition and allow the distribution of alcohol and partaking and making of alcohol. The Republicans nominated Herbert Hoover, who was dry, meaning he was in favor of prohibition. He was a Quaker. He had been in government. He was the Secretary of Commerce under Harding and Coolidge. He was also in one of the commissions during World War I in the government. So he had extensive experience in federal government. He was also a economic guru, and he knew how to handle the economy in his own right. So he was voted in because the economy was doing well, and he was seen as a guy that you look to when the economy, how to keep this thing rolling. So as you see, Republican prosperity in the 1920s ensures an easy victory for Hoover. So moving on, that's how, check it out. That's how it was right there. The red states are Hoover. Interestingly enough, Smith couldn't win his home state, but he won Massachusetts, and he won 6 southern states. The economics here, stock markets. Basically, it's a system of buying and selling shares of companies, like it is today. A bull market, that means a long period of rise in stock. So a bull market's good, hence that's why they have the bull outside of the stock market, the golden bull. Margin, this is buying stock and paying a small cash down payment for that stock. Good if prices are rising. And basically what you would do is you'd buy stock at about 10% of what the stock was worth. So make it easy. Figure if it's a $100 stock, you only had to put 10% down on it. You were paying $10 for a $100 stock. The problem with that is if the stock goes down in value, you still have to pay that back. And you're going to, basically the stock's not going to be worth as much as you pay for it, but you still have to pay the whole $100 back. What is a margin call? And we'll get to that a little bit later. But what is a margin call? It's demanding the investor to repay the loan all at once. So imagine you bought one stock for $100 and you bought it for $10. A margin call is you've got to pay that $100 back today, all at once. So Black Tuesday, what happens here is 1929, okay? Early September, prices peaked, and then they begin to decline. October 24th, the market drops sharply. Nervous investors start selling their stocks, and this will cause a tailspin to finally 5 days later, October 29th, 1929, it's Black Tuesday. People and corporations panicked, and they sold their stock before the market price got any lower. And these shares that were dumped in one day alone, 16 million. By November, investors had lost over $30 million in 1929 money, and that's like billions, if not trillions today. So we have 2 problems. Banks had loaned a lot of money to speculators to buy in the stocks and to buy in land. So in other words, if I borrowed $100 from a bank, I could go buy a stock worth $100 for $10. So I could go buy $100 worth of stock, but it'd really be $200. And so what would happen is these companies would make a margin call and want me to pay my money back immediately, and then I'd have to go take money out from the bank. Well, guys, banks were doing this too. Banks loan money to speculators, but banks were speculating themselves. So this is a big problem here. As you see, invested depositors or invested depositors' money in the stock market. The banks did. So the banks played this game too. They were paying a little bit for getting a lot more stock as well. As you see here, you can't loan money. And when you can't loan money, this causes recessions. Some people are forced to close. Banks are forced to close their doors forever. And as you see, this loses confidence in the public and banks. Basically, what would happen here is with these banks, if they shut their doors before closing time and they ran out of money, that would mean your life savings was gone. So you lost all of your money in the bank. In other words, you lost all of your life savings. So anything you had in that bank, if that bank closed down early, you lost everything. And there were people who were in their 50s and 60s who had their life savings in there all gone. So it destroys a lot of people financially. Millions and millions of people it destroys. So here's some more causes. Overproduction in the 1920s. We have huge farm surpluses because during World War I, we fed everybody. Because in Europe, they were fighting a war, so they bought crops from us. Farmers expand their land. They buy new land. Well, in the 1920s, we're not feeding all these European countries. So we have a lot of food over here that's being grown, and nobody wants to buy it. So basically, the price will lower, which hurts the farmers, and they're trying to pay off this land that they had bought. So as you see, there's less consumption of food or less consumption of these goods, and the price is going to go down. Banks stop loaning money to foreign companies. So we're tightening up on our lending. We have an old industrial base here in the U.S., outmodeled, out-equipped, made some companies less competitive in the world. We have a new tariff passed. It's called the Hawley-Smoot tariff. It raises tariffs to the highest level in U.S. history. At this time, this dramatically hurts our economy, and it hurts us because, once again, it's just like tariffs today. When you raise a tariff, it discourages other countries from trading with you, and you have to make the good here in the U.S., that's fine, but it raises the price of the goods. So the Smoot-Hawley tariff, or the Hawley-Smoot tariff, is going to really hurt our economy in 1930. Federal Reserve Board keeps rates very low to encourage speculators. Banks make risky loans, and you get a lot of false hope here. So with the Federal Reserve keeping the rates very low to encourage these speculators, this is actually a bad thing for our economy because it gets more people to borrow money and to lend money. And during this time, you needed to kind of hold on to your money, not spend it away. People were living above their means. There was too much available credit through installment plans. There's too much debt, and it caused people to cut back. So when they cut back, they're not spending their money. So this is a little chart of the Great Depression. You can look at it a little bit more in depth. It's called the spiral of depression. People lose their jobs, fewer goods are sold, demand drops in order to stay in business. Companies cut wages, people lose their confidence, and they start saving money their own way. Demand drops even further. Companies are forced to cut costs by laying off people, and even more people lose confidence and spend less money. So, as you see here, life during the Depression, 12 million people go unemployed. Income decreased by 30%. Bread and soup lines become a very common thing to see. Food will be provided by charities, not the federal government. The federal government in Hoover, they stay out of people's business for the most part, during the early times of his dealings with the Great Depression. So in cities, you start to see shanty towns, soup kitchens, and bread lines. What is a shanty town? This is a town that's built of scrap wood and leftover pieces, and you have a dirt floor, and you just live. You just live wherever you can build your little house. No running water, no toilets, no nothing. They were called, my grandmother called them Hoover towns. She didn't know the Great Depression by the Great Depression. She knew it as Hoover times because that's what people of her generation knew it as Hoover times for President Hoover. Rural areas, as you see, farms are foreclosed on, food supplies in short demand, and we get this thing called the Dust Bowl, which we're going to talk about. And it's just basically overfarming the Great Plains, and we don't really resod it, and so we get these winds that come along, and we have what's called the Dust Bowl. To add to the misery, family life, men on the move, 2 million men, good, middle class, hardworking men will leave their families, and they will never return to their families, and they'll just wander the countryside on trains, boxcars. Hobos become a thing during this time, and actually, kind of a lot of hobos. This is created at this time. They couldn't stand seeing their families starve to death, so they just left their families. As you see, hardships for women, the health of children. Malnutrition diseases come back, rickets, scurvy, all of this stuff comes back. We have kids in the Midwest dying of too much dust in their lungs from the Dust Bowl. As you see, the suicide rate rises 30% between 1928 and 1932. Mental illness, dreams basically forsaken, ethics and hard work all down the drain pretty much. So, homes. As you see, families lose their homes, evictions are forced, shanty towns are set up. This is a picture of a shanty town. So, Hoover's resolve. Here's what he said was, oh, my bad, go back. Here's what he said was going to win this thing. Rugged individualism. Created a government agency to help businesses recover. He gave no direct relief to the people. And as you see, Hoover Bills, this is an example of a Hooverville. They're set up. So if you look here, these are some things he starts to do. The Boulder Dam project, which will become the Hoover Dam. He directed funds for this. It's going to add about 6,000 jobs. In 1933, Hoover and Congress passes a series of acts to help the economy. The Federal Home Loan Bank Act lowers mortgage rates. The RFC, Reconstruction Finance Corporation Act, provides emergency funds to banks, life insurance companies, railroads. The Bonus Army, this happens in 1932 and pretty much seals Hoover's fate. Radicals begin to develop. Basically, you have World War I veterans campaigning Washington. I think it's called the Patterson Bill. And they wanted to get their retirement benefits early. The bill's defeated. Hoover wants the crowd. The crowd is actually on what is today the national. Oh gosh, what do you call it? The national. Basically where everybody meets. But as you said, right there near the Anacostia River. And Hoover wants this crowd disbanded, and he asked General MacArthur to disband this crowd peacefully. MacArthur goes in and basically firebombs the place and kills 8 people, I believe. So this kind of seals Hoover's fate. So here's the Dust Bowl you'll see. Drought, no grass. I've got videos here for you. People move to California from Oklahoma. They're called Okies at first. That's okay. Then it becomes a derogatory slang. Pictures of the Dust Bowl. As you see it moving there. There's some more pictures. And guys, I do want to emphasize Herbert Hoover was a very smart president. He takes the blame for the Great Depression. But he did look at all sides of what he could do, and he saw the negatives to every side. To whereas your next president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's going to say, we got to try something. We got to do this, and if it fails, it fails. But he is a man of action. Hoover is not as dumb in history as people think he is. Here you go. He's not as dumb in history as people think he is. He knew, he was an economist. He knew what to do. He just was paralyzed because he knew like we had put this nation deeply in debt. So that's all I have for you right now, guys.